My name is Eugene Giudice, and I'm the author of the book, A Librarian, Sojourn, Messages of Hope and Inspiration. I want to thank the IA Literati Committee and the team here at Casa Italia of the Cultural Center for the invitation to speak about my book. I also want to give thanks to my Lord and Savior for these many years of providential care. As background to this talk, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born the third child of the late Ennio and the late Rosa Giudice in February 1964, and I grew up in Melrose Park. I have an older sister, Patrina Collins, and an older brother, Gerard Giudice. I am joined here by my wife of 23 years, Colleen. Any accomplishments that I have made are due large in part to her love and confidence in me. I attended Our Lady of Mount Carmel Grammar School and Walter Lutheran High School. I did my undergraduate work at Concordia University in River Forest. I hold an MBA from DePaul University and an MLIS from Dominican University in River Forest. I've been a law librarian for almost 20 years now, and I'm currently employed as a law librarian at the law firm of Denton's U.S. LLP. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, shout out to Pope Leo XIV, past Grand Knight with the Knights of Columbus, and a member of several library associations, including the Chicago Association of Law Libraries, the American Library Association, and the American Association of Law Libraries. I am also a Zionist and an ally to my Jewish and Israeli friends and colleagues. It would be correct to say that this book was the product of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reflections contained are the product of something that was said early on during the pandemic. In early March of 2020, when it appeared that everyone in my firm was going to be working remotely, we had an all-hands call in which our firm managing partner, then Michael McNamara, encouraged us to reach out to each other in mutual support. I took that statement and started writing. I figured I would write for 90 days, we'd go back to the office, it would be a nice little writing exercise, and that would be it. Little did I know that I would be writing for over 2 years, compiling over 360 reflections and over 130,000 words. While this narrative is indeed accurate about the book, as I was preparing for this talk, it dawned on me that while correct, the narrative was also incomplete. I have come to believe that this book's roots lie in my parents' immigrant experience and the larger story of the Italian diaspora. The origins of this book can truly be found in the small village of Sanerchia in the Provincia of Avellino, where my father comes from, and in a flat at number 4 Duncan Terrace in London, which was at that time part of a larger Italian expatriate community in London from which my mother came from. As I was writing these reflections contained in the book, my mind settled on 3 basic themes that I needed to try to set a stage for people to think about a post-pandemic world based on justice, compassion, and inclusion. As I think back on it, isn't that what our ancestors were seeking when they left Italy to come to this country? Weren't they seeking a place where the rule of law was paramount? Where they were not subject to the whims of some noble or lord? They were seeking a place where they would be shown kindness and regard for their dignity, and a place where they would be included in shaping the destiny of their new homeland. To be honest, this country, this nation, has not always been a bastion of justice, compassion, and inclusion. One need only recall the unjust quota system that skewed against people from Southern Europe, or where Italians were not considered Caucasian or white until the 1920s, or the lynching of 11 Italians in New Orleans in 1891. Our nation, this country, has always been and will continue to be a work in progress when it comes to justice, compassion, and inclusion. The daily writings of these reflections and its compilation into this volume is my small attempt to, as I put it in the book, try to bend the arc of history towards greater justice, compassion, and inclusion. Each reflection is based on a quotation from a famous or not so famous person. I would expand on the quotation to make it relevant to the current time and always pointing toward how we envision a post-pandemic world of justice, compassion, and inclusion. The process of writing these reflections typically started out on a Sunday night where I would browse a website called Brainy Quote, shout out to Brainy Quote, to pick the quotes that I would be using in the coming week's writing. As with anything, sometimes the writing was very hard. Sometimes the writing came very easily. Sometimes I was influenced by events that occurred, such as the killing of George Floyd, the January 6th insurrection. I thought events such as this, and my emphasis on justice and compassion and inclusion, really had its start. Once the reflection was written, I would send it out via email to a distribution list to about 300. This went on 5 days a week. Now, I'm a big believer in the fact that one can only write from one's own experience. I know something of justice. I have seen attorneys in my firm break their backs for their pro bono clients as aggressively and maybe often more so than they would for some of the other matters that they worked on. I have sat in the jury box and passed judgment on another human being. I was even jury foreman. That's another story for another time. I have had compassion shown to me, and I have shown compassion to others. And maybe more importantly, there have been times where I did not show compassion. I have been honored and privileged to include people from many different backgrounds in my life. And I have been included, both personally and professionally, by many people who have appreciated my skills and gifts. Conversely, there have been times where I have not been inclusive of people. And there have been times when I have been excluded. I talk about what's going on in this book, but I also think it's also important to talk about the outcomes of this book. Being a self-published author, you don't have the backing of a big publishing house to help with promotions and sales, so I can't give you realistic dollars and cents profit on this book, nor can I tell you how many people purchased a copy. It would not surprise me if I had actually given away more copies than I sold. The true outcomes can be found in the messages that I received from others that said something to the effect of, what you said in your reflection today is what I needed to hear today. I'm not going to flatter myself and lie to you and say that I got these messages daily, but I did get enough of them to help sustain me in the work. I would not be surprised if there are many instances of this, but people kept that private to themselves, which is okay by me. As long as they found something that would help them get them through the next week, or the next day, or even the next 10 minutes, that's enough for me. As for the book itself, I have a similar hope that it will find its way into somebody's hands at a crucial moment in their lives. And they will find something that will urge them on to become the person that God or destiny intended them to be. As for me, the outcomes have been that I have started to become more sanguine about this thing we called life. And I'm getting better at looking at the glass as half filled versus half empty. In writing this book, I have had to look into my own life, into my own shortcomings, and maybe this has made me maybe a little more sympathetic when dealing with other people's shortcomings. The pandemic shined a bright light on the fragility of our human condition, and this has given me a sense of urgency about doing good towards others, or as my Jewish friends would say, to be a mensch or a mitzvah to others. I have also become less apt to wait to say or to do something that would be supportive of others. Patience in general is not my strong suit, ask my wife. But if I have become impatient about doing good, that can't be such a bad thing. Now, it would be easy and the simplistic thing to say, oh, isn't that nice? He wrote all those things to help somebody over a tough time, but now let's all go get back to normal. Everything I've written in this book is not simply to make people feel good, either about themselves or their situation. It is to get people to consider what it really means to have a world built on justice, compassion, and inclusion. The feeling of let's just move on reminds me of a line from the Oscar-winning film, The Best Years of Our Lives. In the movie, a recently discharged veteran who worked in a bank as an executive before the war, and as a man who has seen much of death and battle, his reaction when the bank manager calls him upon his return home. The veteran gets off the phone with the bank president and says, with somewhat of a sad-looking face, he says, "Last year, it was kill Japs. This year, it's make money." In that statement, he knew there was no going back to normal, whatever that is. And the same can be said of us. The pandemic forced the blinders from many eyes, and there's no going back to the way things used to be. Unfortunately, I sense that in many ways, not only are we forgetting the hard-learned lessons of the pandemic, lessons of compassion and care for others, but we are regressing. How many businesses do you go into where you see the little sign on the door that says, "We will not tolerate abuse of our employees"? Who would have thought that people would have to be reminded about that 5 years, 10 years ago? I'm not saying that all the answers to the ills of society lie in this book. But what I am hoping for is that this book might spur thought, civil debate on what does it mean to be a society based on justice, compassion, and inclusion. I have said it frequently that we have one, maybe 2 generations to try to get this right. If we don't make any attempt toward greater compassion, justice, and inclusion, history and future generations will not be kind to us. Now, I don't mean to end this little talk on such a somber note. I'm a great admirer of Harry Truman. In fact, his grandson lives not far from where Colleen and I live. Mr. Truman had a penchant for speaking in plain, unambiguous Missouri language. He had great faith in the American people and their ability to spot a charlatan who was selling them a bill of goods from whatever political bent or side spectrum that they came from. I too have that same hope, that common sense, common decency, and common care will break through the noise of our current discourse. Maybe all it takes is for each of us to bend our own little personal arc of history, just a little bit, towards greater justice, compassion, and inclusion. I'd like to read something from the book that I think might spur some thought. This was a reflection that I wrote on the 22nd of October, 2021. Good morning. I always started the reflections with good morning. It says, recently I've been watching programs on the Smithsonian Network that explore various areas of the country. The photography is done via drone and the vistas are striking. I find the desert Southwest especially interesting. You see these expanses of peaceful desert and the dunes and sandstone buttes dotting the landscape. In contrast, the Roman historian Tacitus turned this idea of the peaceful desert on its head. Tacitus says, they make a desert and call it peace. It is interesting to contrast these 2 visions of the desert. The one is made by nature itself and evokes thoughts of peace. The other one that Tacitus speaks about is wrought by human hands. The context of the statement is that Tacitus attributes the statement to the Roman general Agricola at the Battle of Graupius, which occurred in Scotland around the year 84 AD. Some historians dispute Tacitus' account. Setting aside the accuracy of the statement, I think there's something left for us to learn. How often do we hear individuals or groups saying they just want to be left in peace? They apparently wish to withdraw from the society around them into isolation and call that peace. I would submit that maybe that what they are doing by withdrawing from others, they are building a wasteland, a desert, in other words, for themselves, and calling it peace. The older I get, the more I realize that our future is inexorably linked with everyone else's future. All the world's money, power, possessions won't amount to a hill of beans if we are isolated in a desert of our own making. The pandemic has taught us all something about deserts. We have had to forge ahead while sheltering in place, being cut off from others and the rituals surrounding our lives. It has not been easy for any of us. But maybe the reason we, read me, have had to sojourn in this desert of isolation is to better value and appreciate those around us, both near and far, and consider what it will take to help others end their desert journey and together create a community built on justice, compassion, and inclusion. And the question is, how will you be moving out of the desert today? And then I close by saying, working with you in creating a lush, green, and verdant peace. And as they say, I now take your questions.
I want to make one comment. As a fellow Zionist, I'd like to know how you think it's great to balance that inclusion when you're going up against enemies that want to destroy the state of Israel and an ideology who seeks to dominate the world.
It's interesting you point that out, in that I've always found and I see this in my Jewish fellows and colleagues, a great resiliency and their ability to draw out of themselves a way to survive even in the face of such great adversity. And in addition, I'm reminded of what Golda Meir said. She said that we can forgive, she was speaking to the enemies of Israel, she said, we can forgive you for the killing of our children. The one thing that we cannot forgive you is that you have forced us to kill your children. And I think that attitude, that extension of oneself, moving out of one's own communal experience and really feeling for that pain of others, I think that is what has sustained, in my personal opinion, what has sustained the modern state of Israel and Jews in general for many years. I don't know if I'm hitting where your question is at, but it's worthy of thought.
Yeah, and also just to maintain that the enemies that they're fighting, the ideology that they're fighting, is often like basically not faced up to by the media today.
No.
In other words, you get a narrative, and almost as if the people they're fighting against are the victims.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that happens, the more Israel's hands are tied.
No,
Made out to be the bad guy.
I
It's
agree.
just harder to be inclusive and forgiving and peaceful when you're dealing with the kind of enemy that only respects force in a lot of ways.
Oh no, I agree. I've told my Jewish colleagues and I have had discussions that we all have great hope for the people of Gaza, provided that they can break off these shackles of those that would want to destroy them.
And maybe UAE is the only good example they can follow.
Yeah. Please.
If I heard you correctly, you wrote about 300,000 words, or
130,000 words and 360 reflections.
How much of that is in the book? And
All of it.
The other, okay.
It's all there.
Oh, I was gonna ask the same question about the length of time and the way that you set it up.
Yeah, this is actually the second book. There's a first book that had only the first year's writing. This has all of that plus everything else after that first year.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.